Hey Year 11. So, this session we're looking at the structural frame in depth. We have done in Chapter 5 our introduction. So, our student tasks are organized in a way where we analyze each frame further in relation to our body of work. So, structural means how to build something. So, when you hear the structural frame, you think, how is it built? What is it made of? Referring to the materials. So, the quote that is started here is art is not what you see, but what you make others see. Okay, so when we look at art making through the structural frame, we try to understand how a work is put together. By studying a work and the practice of the artist, we can develop an understanding of the underlying structure that holds work together. We can begin by asking whether the work belongs to a particular art style or a genre or a type. So, a good example of that is how structurally, when we look at artworks that is from the Renaissance period, there are particular materials that artists use. So it's the oil paint, it's the style that reference structurally how that artwork was made. So when we look at fine art and when we're critically analyzing images, we need to make sure that we're referring to the citation, looking at the materials, looking at the date, and that will indicate the art style or the genre that it belongs to. So, conventions of practice. So, over the years, groups of artists have established particular ways of working in a certain style and with certain materials. These styles and techniques then become artistic conventions. So each style of art making and each medium has its own set of rules and traditions that have been developed over time. So this is really important, conventions of practice. So you've just finished or completed your term one body of work, and most art students will just do drawing or painting because that's what they know. But my question to you is, what do you know about the conventions of practice? What history have you investigated or researched about that expressive form? Now, that's up to you as an art student to investigate that further. That is not displayed in a prerequisite learning of each expressive form, because to structure that in a classroom is impossible. So, the way that this course is structured is that you pick an expressive form that you're either comfortable with, that you want to explore, that you're inspired to try or experiment, and you need to actively go and investigate and research that. It is so important. The basic errors that happen as an art student is the fact that you haven't done investigation or research to support your practice. So you are actually doing things at a juvenile level, and someone, especially a HSC marker, is not going to give you marks for that approach because it's actually devaluing your work. So it's really important that you know the conventions of your art practice. So if you're doing sculpture, you need to know the history of sculpture. You need to know the reasons why you're choosing the materials. Why are you choosing lead? Is it because you're really comfortable with lead? But what is it that you know about lead pencil? What is it that you know about shadowing? Have you done your foundation skills with whatever expressive form you have chosen to develop in your body of work? You need to know the foundations. You need to experiment with those foundations, those foundation skills. So if you're drawing, you should be working on shading. You should be working on how to hold a pencil. Most drawers hold a pencil the way that we write. When you go to university and you're doing a Bachelor of Arts, your lecturer will tell you that that's not how you actually hold a pencil. We've been trained to draw as if we're writing. There are other ways that you can draw. You can draw on an easel, you can draw on the floor, you can draw using a whole body movement. So you need to know why you're doing things, creating artwork with the structural elements? Is it because that's what you've been taught? That's all you know? You need to investigate and research that further. Okay, so order and placement. So the human brain is designed to recognize order and pattern. We are hardwired to respond to structure. As an artist, you can experiment with ways of arranging and placing different elements. So this is in relation to composition. While too much order can be boring, no order results in a mess. So composition, again, research, investigate that. Why is it that your composition, you choose to have a female figure in the center of the page? Would it be better to the left, to the right, to the top of the page? Composition is very important. It is part of the visual language that we read. In this student photograph, the image is dominated by the horizontal and vertical shapes. The careful placement of the elements creates a balanced composition. So looking at Alex's work, it's called the Suburba series. It's made in 2006. It's a photograph. It's 29 by 21 centimeters and it's in the artist collection. So again, we're looking at students' artwork here. So what would happen if Alex had taken the photo a little bit more to the right? It would have been centered. The actual red pole would have been centered in the composition, because if you look at that, and again, we're not just looking and having a quick glance, we're actually looking and reading the visual language, the composition. The actual pole in the center is not actually, if you were to half that photo, is not in the center. It is towards the left hand side of the photo. Okay, and the reason why is because there is another object on the left hand side, so it's quite heavy, it's quite busy on the left hand side. When you look onto the right side of the photo, it doesn't have that pole. So shortening the space on the left hand side has created a composition that appears to be balanced. However, in theory, it's not. These are really important components that you need to consider. Composition, the composition of your artwork, whether it's a painting, whether it's a drawing, whether it's a sculpture, whether it's photo. What is the composition? These are your experiments. So this term, I want to see that your experimentation of composition. Maybe you want to photocopy your artwork, but then change the composition as you photocopy it, so that you have a series of work that explores those compositional series or selections. Okay, so symbols, signs and symbols are very important in any artwork. Signs and symbols, even though you haven't done a thesis on signs and symbols, you are decoding signs and symbols every single day. You have the ability to do that. You are already, as mentioned before, hardwired to read visual language. It's quite contemporary and postmodern, and it's due to the access to the internet, your phone, how we view things as an audience now. That has definitely changed from my viewing as a viewer or an audience, say in the last 5-10 years. So the structural frame also focuses on how images can function as a language. For example, we consider whether an artwork uses symbols and signs to communicate ideas. In the ceramic sculpture opposite, a Year 11 student set out to create a primitive looking figure representing the ancient Celtic nature god. I think it's Coronis. I think that's how you pronounce it. After researching different representations of this horned god, the student discovered the meanings behind the symbols that were used to depict him. He's usually portrayed as a mature man with long hair and a beard. Okay, his most distinctive feature is the stag horns. These antlers symbolize masculinity and are associated with fertility as well. The twisted ornament around his neck and sometimes shown in his hand is a torque, which symbolizes authority and power. After determining which were the most important symbols associated with this particular god, the student made hundreds of sketches of them, trying to incorporate them into a plan for his sculpture. So, what does that mean? It means that the student has researched and investigated their theme. Okay, it's really important to do that. A lot of our past art student essays were about ourselves. It's the hardest essay that you ever have to write in prelim and probably in the HSC is writing about yourself, writing about your body of work and writing about your artwork. But it is designed to see where you're at with yourself, how you view yourself and how you understand art. It clearly indicates whether you have researched or investigated your topic or your theme or your body of work. Now, people in class have a theme and you can discuss that in your essay, but if you do not have support with research or investigations, your artwork is not going to be conceptually sound or not have the conceptual meaning, the desired conceptual meaning. Now, there are some instances where students will say, I create art with no particular meaning. That is a superficial response. It is unacceptable in senior visual arts. Art doesn't happen in a vacuum. You are not a genius. Unfortunately, you are not a genius. Everything has done prior to you or before you. And so this visual language means something, whether it's color theory, whether it's shapes, art elements, there is meaning in your work and you need to find it to be able to strengthen the conceptual meaning. Maybe the conceptual meaning is not attached to a social issue, but even if you are just drawing simple drawings of characters, you need to know what characters, when was the history of characters, when was the history of cartoons, who employed color first in cartoons characters, where is the history of this. You need to research and investigate your particular theme. If you don't do it, you run the risk of creating artwork that has no value in conceptual meaning. And if it doesn't have a value in conceptual meaning, guaranteed the HSC markers aren't going to be able to mark it or give you the mark you think you deserve. So, choice of materials is important. The structural frame also looks at how the physical qualities of work convey a meaning. The student also wanted to convey the ancient quality of this subject. So, going back to the student's work, okay, the sculpture, if they had created this artwork out of, say, wood, would it change the meaning? Yes, because wood and carving and sculpture is of a particular time period, a genre, an art style. Perhaps that would change the conceptual meaning. Yes, it would. Would it change the strength? Perhaps it would. But these are things that you need to consider. So when you're creating artwork, you need to ask yourself, what other materials can I be experimenting and what effect does that have on the conceptual meaning and the strength? That is your reflection. You need to be reflecting on your work because you are never finished. You are never sat down and finished in your work and say that is done. You need to critically analyze your artwork all the time and reflect as well. So his challenge was how to make his new sculpture look old. When his teacher suggested researching different commercially available paint finishes, the student discovered a metallic paint that could be aged with acid and salt. Although the sculpture was made from clay, which was kiln fired, the final finish was the appearance of a metal sculpture that had been exposed to the elements for hundreds of years. The green patina on the metallic surface communicates the idea of age. So when we look at that particular sculpture, we read that it is ceramic with copper and patina finish. But if we were not to see that citation and we were to look at that, the visual language displayed there would suggest that it is an old sculpture, that it may be made out of some type of metal. So it gives this illusion, the signs and the symbols that the student has used was there to create a narrative of a historical component of this artwork. These things are super important. Now, if you're doing an artwork and you don't want it to have the sense of history, the sense of age, then you wouldn't use these materials. Okay, so there are things that we can use structurally to enhance our conceptual meaning. Okay, so a color is as strong as the impression it creates. This refers to color theory. There has been instances where students will, I just like this color. You can like the color, but you actually need to research, and you also need to understand color theory before you create an artwork, or when you're critically reflecting and analyzing on your artwork. This color theory is a foundation. You need to know it. You need to know why you're using it. This is something for you to investigate, research further. You need to do that. That is your student responsibility in regards to your artworks, your body of work, and your majors. You need to know everything. Everything that there is to know, why you're using the materials, why you're using the colors. Go through the art, the elements of art. Revise elements of art. Go through it. Some of them will be really easy to reflect on in your work. Okay, so student task is 6.3. So you need to research 2 artists who work with the same materials you are using, but who use them in a different way. So earlier I was suggesting you need to research, you need to investigate. Student task 6.3 supports you in doing that. This highlights the importance of doing student tasks and doing them in depth, because they are not designed to just keep you busy. It's not a data dump. It's part of the course, and it's structured to actually help you create conceptual meaning, conceptual strength, but also develop a body of work moving towards a complete major, a strong major for a strong result. Okay, so the second thing is try to discover something about the medium that you previously did not know. Can you use this knowledge in your own art practice? Okay. 3, think about your own body of work and critically view it from the structural frame. Ask yourself the following questions. Does the body of work express your individual art style? Okay, what is your individual art style? If you don't know, ask your peers. If you don't know, ask an audience. What are the established conventions associated with the artworks you are developing? So what is it that you have done, you're doing, that is the foundation, is the conventions associated to drawing, painting, sculpture, graphic design, photography? What is it that you do that every single other artist that uses that material, what are the conventions? You need to know that. You need to know the conventions of your expressive form. And if you don't know, this is the time that you need to investigate and research. What signs, symbols, and visual codes, such as color, shape, and texture, will you use to express your intentions? How will the audience understand these? Okay, what can you learn from other artists working in the similar ways? How can the practice of other artists assist you in developing your own body of work? You need to answer those questions for me, please. Student task 6.3, the structural frame. I will see you, and we will finish this off with the postmodern frame.